Hello, I'm Yasmin Greenhalgh, the Children's and Youth Librarian at Stanton Library. I would like to acknowledge the Gymragal people of the Eora Nation, on whose land we live, work and play. Sovereignty was never ceded. To formally welcome you to the 2020 Nan Manefield Young Writers Award, I would like to introduce the Mayor of North Sydney Council, Jelly Gibson.
Welcome to the North Sydney Council's 2020 Nan Manefield Young Writers Award. These awards are usually announced at an event in Stanton Library. However, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we've had to change many things in our lives, and our Young Writers Award is one of them. In place of a presentation, we have created this video, which includes the young authors and poets talking about their inspiration and reading their winning entries. We'll also hear from our judges, who once again have done a fantastic job assessing hundreds of high-quality entries. Thank you to all the marvellous young people who took part, as well as the parents, carers and teachers who supported them through this process. Finally, I would like to thank our library team, especially Yasmin, Megan and Eliza, who have allowed the work of our young authors to shine, despite the difficult circumstances of this year.
The judge for the 11 years age category this year is Ursula Dubasarski. Ursula is an author of over 50 books for children and young adults. She has been nominee for the Hans Christian Andersen Award and Astrid Lindgren Memorial Award and has won more writing awards than we can count. She is also wonderfully this year's Australian Children's Laureate, and we're very, very pleased to have her on board. Thank you, Ursula.
Hello everybody, I'm Ursula Dubasarski and I am the judge for the 11-year age group of North Sydney Council's Nan Manefield Young Writers Award. And in case you're wondering why I'm wearing this wreath of the leaves of the laurel tree on my head, I'm also at the moment the Australian Children's Laureate, which means over the next couple of years I'll be talking to as many children as possible all over Australia about what a wonderful thing reading is, what terrific things libraries are, and what a very important and special thing writing is. I want to say a special congratulations to the ever inspirational staff of Stanton Library for keeping this award going during this time of the confinement. And it's just a great pleasure for me to read the entries, and I know it's a very special thing for all the young writers to have this competition to enter as well. I look forward to it every year. In a way, reading the stories is like hearing the voices of you 11-year-olds out there and what you're thinking, what you're imagining, how you express themselves. And I'm always very moved and impressed by the entries. It's a bit like peering into the windows of these very young and vital and eloquent minds. Now, the hard part, of course, is picking the winner, because really every story or poem is so individual. Every writer is as different from each other as the fingerprint. So it is a hard thing to pick the winners, but in the end, I guess I'm looking for that individual voice. And that's not just the language, the words and the sentences, although that's an important part of it. But a writer's voice is also the way the writer looks at the world, the characters they create, the sort of the events they invent that happen to the characters, the settings, everything that writer chooses to put into the story, and in particular the way the writer shapes those events and the characters. I think in the end, it comes down to that rather mysterious thing called originality, which is a beautiful quality. And I have to say, originality is abundant in the young writers that have entered the award this year. So congratulations to everybody who entered. Special congratulations to everybody who is receiving a merit certificate for their entry, and big congratulations to the 3 place winners. So I'm just going to read out the names of the merit certificate winners and the name of their story as well. So the merit certificate winners are Chelsea Huey for What I Learned One Night, Claudia Antor for Radiation Slam Poem, Gemma Green for The End Unless... Joseph Malev for Todd, Jessie McCowan for Just a Girl, Lucy Moon for The Coming of Spring, Rory Keeler for A Snowy, Blowy Christmas, Saskia Elliott for Magic, Isabella Cunningham for The Story of Night and Day, and Zara Eid for Understanding. The Commended Award goes to Joanna Ludica for her charming and topical free verse poem, A Seagull Named Jessie. The Highly Commended Award goes to Aaron Lee for his dreamy and lyrical prose study, The Winter Forest. And the winner of the 11 years age category for the 2020 Nan Manefield Young Writers Award goes to Gemma Clark for Home, which is a poetic and very moving story of a lonely, displaced child finding meaning and love even in a new land. So congratulations, Gemma, and congratulations, everybody. And thank you again, Stanton Library, for allowing me to be the judge for this year's writing competition.
My name is Gemma Clark and I entered the writing competition. My story is called Home. I wrote this story because I was inspired by history lessons at school about early colonisation of Australia. I also love animals and I was reading about how eastern quolls are critically endangered. I researched online and found that this problem started when convicts first arrived in Sydney and cleared land for crops and prickly pears. This displaced many native animals. I felt sorry for the animals during this sudden change, and I also thought about how convicts were also displaced and away from home. My story is about people and animals finding a new home. Home can be many different places. You just need to feel like you belong. Home. The bitter night air slapped at William's tender cheeks as he skidded across some mossy, undulating rocks. His eyes darted frantically, trying to seek shelter. Rifle shots resonated around the valley, and the whinnying of the horses echoed back. His heart raced as he desperately ran along the slope of the valley. Gleaming sweat poured down William's forehead as he clambered through banksy trees which guarded a low-lying cave like soldiers. He curled into a ball, his breath becoming shallow, and a small spray of blood drenched his colossal breeches. Gradually, he fell into an unconscious sleep, barely aware of the eastern quoll which scrambled into his vicinity. Captain Phillip and his men relented in their search for the boy and rode into the pink-tinged horizon. A cobalt blue blanket studded with glittering gems wrapped itself around the world. William's blood-encrusted eyelashes flickered as he recalled the events which had taken place over the past months. Stealing medicine for his dying mother led shamefully appearing in the London County Court and being banished by boat to the uninhabited island Terra Australis. After the treacherous sea trip, he was chased when caught stealing kilos of prickly pears from the Parramatta dye house for his own sustenance. William had overheard a group of convicts gossiping about Arthur Phillip's great discovery of the prickly pear in Brazil. On the way to Terra Australis, the settlers had established a dye-making business used to make coats for the British soldiers, using the natural red colouring produced by the red cochineal insects after feeding on the pear. Parramatta had been logged in order to plant crops, including the prickly pear. William had seen hundreds of animal carcasses peppered across the surroundings every time he headed home from his blacksmithing job. William's inner thoughts were interrupted by a prickly tickle against his leg. The boy recoiled and turned slowly, absorbing every detail of the baby quoll, which was chased away from the plantations. He observed the the way the quoll's eyes flickered and sensed its musky smell, which enveloped the cave. Every step the boy took, the quoll gingerly trailed behind him, trembling all over. Its quivering became more pronounced when a loud human call and the sudden whip of an axe wedging into a neighbouring tree trunk was heard. The most abysmal strikes of fear followed, rifle shots and the wild flapping of wings, which sounded as if the whole planet might be taking off in flight. More voices erupted, screaming, yelling, and beckoning. William retrieved the succulent, prickly pears and plucked out the spines. He placed a piece on the mossy carpet for the quoll. He quenched his own thirst while the quoll vacuumed up the last piece. Even through all the noise, the quoll's eyelids grew heavy. As the animal slept, the boy heard the insidious sound of hunting. As the shadow grew longer on the caven wall, the commotion outside gradually eased, and his new role caring for the baby quoll comforted him. It was the death of another day as the two wayfarers slept. Thin rays of morning sun streamed into the opening of the cavern, and shades of tarnished tangerine reflected from his eyes as he stared out, mesmerised by the sunrise. Williams glanced down at the defenceless baby quoll and felt a surge of conviction overcame him. He staggered to his feet, feeling fatigued, but resisted the urge to collapse. As the young boy cradled the sleeping animal in his arms, a stream of salty tears trickled onto his spotted fur. The baby quoll, lost like William, needed to leave this unwelcoming, desolate land and find a home in its natural habitat. They trailed across kilometres of terrain. The settlements were far behind them now. The rocks in the creek answered the sun's rays, dappling the trickling water with a glistening green. Dirt was streaked across William's pale face, and small wounds and scratches covered his lean body. He bent down, and the cool water was a reprieve. A mixture of his toil, sweat, blood, and dirt was washed away by Earth's lifeblood. With a shuddering breath, the boy heaved himself into a standing position. The birds summoned the end of the day. Every leaf, every seed, and each bushland animal were ready with open arms as the quolls scampered into the undergrowth knowingly. A watery smile reluctantly widened upon William's face. He edged away and glanced back to see the quoll pouring intently at a bottle brush. He was home.
Erin Goff is our judge for the 12 years age category this year. She's a Sydney writer whose award-winning work has been published internationally. She's the author of 2 books for young adults, The Flywheel, which won the Ampersand Prize, and Amelia Westlake, winner of the Readings Young Adult Book Prize and the New South Wales Premier's Eternal Prize for Young Adult. Thank you, Erin.
Hello everyone, my name's Erin Goff and it's a pleasure to be announcing the winners of the 12-year 2020 Nan Manefield Young Writers Award. I really enjoyed reading the entries to the award this year. It was such a strong group of stories and poems. As always, I noticed particular themes coming through and some very sophisticated themes. There were tales of murder, tales of revenge, meditations on loss, and on the passage of time as observed through nature. There were even tales of time travel. The writing that really stood out for me this year did a number of things. It captured my attention, first of all, through its language or its ideas or its use of suspense, or sometimes through more than one of these techniques. It used words thoughtfully and creatively, but also precisely. Every word had a purpose and all were properly used. It was original in form and content. The best writing also did something else. It carried an idea through to an end point. This did not always mean a conclusion of plot. In some cases, it meant outlining a problem and then posing a question. And in this way, encouraging contemplation, challenging the reader to engage with the proposition it put forward. So thank you to each and every one of you who entered the award. It was an honour to read your writing. And now for the announcement of the awards. In the 12-year Nan Manefield Young Writers Award for 2020, the Merit Certificate winners are Angelique Vasiliadis, Ben Murray, Brianna Destro, Kiera Woods, Libby Frawley Green, Ningwan Ma, Ophelia Wong, Rebecca France, Tegan Wong, and Tony Chen. The Commended Award goes to Renee Lee for her poem From the Tide to the Shore. The Highly Commended Award goes to Alira Janusa for her story Tiger. And the winner of the 12 years age category for the 2020 Nan Manefield Young Writers Award goes to Jessica Ellis for Veritas, a gripping and beautifully paced morality tale about a book that turns whatever is written inside it into truth and poses a very interesting question as its conclusion. Congratulations, everybody.
Hello everybody, my name is Jessica Ellis. I'm 12 years old and I go to Anona School. I would just like to say how grateful I am that I've been chosen for this. Thank you so much, it really means a lot. I've been asked to answer a couple questions, so here goes. What inspired your writing for this competition? My writing is titled Veritas, which is a Latin word for truth. I got the idea thinking about how we all have things that we wish were true, but if we actually had the power to make them a reality, now that would be cool. What normally inspires your writing? I think a lot of things do. Sometimes I read a book that's based on a really interesting idea and I try to replicate that with my own characters and my own storyline. I love history and there are certain time periods like World War II or ancient Greece that I find fascinating and I've written stories based on that. I'm very passionate about things like education or climate change and I've written poems under those topics. And sometimes my ideas come out of practically nowhere. So, here's my writing. Veritas. Legend has it that if you were to go to a tower, not very different to the crumbling ruins of what was once Rapunzel's, you would come across a thick oak door with iron hinges and a brass eagle knocker. Open that door and you would find yourself within the sorcerer's chambers. Bookshelves reaching towards a ceiling painted with peeling clouds and discoloured rays of sunshine, filled with mouldy books and moth-eaten pages, full of spells and curses, poisons and antidotes. Upon the sorcerer's desk lies the most important and most dangerous of them all, a massive book with a deep blue cover and faded gold lettering, spelling out one word, Veritas. It has been stolen, forgotten, remembered, then hidden, and found, passed from one greedy hand to another, over the centuries, creating a bloody trail over the pages of history itself. It went from king to doctor to duchess to beggar to witch. They all had something in common. None of them lived very long. After all, the higher that you rise, the further you can fall. But what makes this book so special, so magical, so dangerous? It's in the name. Veritas. Truth. Only the truth can be written within Veritas. If a lie, half-truth, mistake, or deception is to be penned on the book's pages, then it shall change the past, the future, or the present to make it true. Just imagine how unstoppable one would be if he had his greedy hands upon this book. King Stephen, ruler of half the world, was the first ever recorded owner of Veritas. His reign was ending and he knew it. More and more rebels attacked the borders each day. Imagine how different life would be today if he hadn't set out his inks and begun to write. The rebels are dead. King Stephen rules the world. King Stephen is loved by all. He is the richest in his entire empire. Long live King Stephen. And so on. With this book, he simply could not be stopped. Until he was. His own daughter, Mabel, sold Veritas as he slept. Mabel is the fairest of them all. Mabel is the queen. Long live Mabel. And so Veritas travelled the world, in the pockets of thieves, the trunks of princesses, and the coats of scientists. And now, although impossible, it has found its way into your arms, sitting right in front of you, motionless, upon the sorcerer's desk, begging you to open it. Do you? You could wish for anything. Power, money, beauty, health, to live forever, people to love you, climate change to end, the world reordered however you desire. Whatever you want, you could rule the world. But let me warn you, there is a reason none of Veritas's previous owners lived very long. Veritas has unimaginable power, but with power comes jealousy and spite, and no matter what you wish for, you shall never be truly safe with Veritas. Veritas means truth, and the truth cannot be erased, no matter how much you want it to be. What do you do next?
The judge for the 13 years age category is Tim Sinclair. Tim is a writer of young adult fiction and poetry. His latest book, Run, is a parkour thriller set in Sydney and was a CBCA notable book, as well as longlisted for the Inky Awards. His other works include the novel 9 Hours North, poetry collection Vapour Trails, and a short story in the Growing Up Queer in Australia anthology. Thank you, Tim.
I did my PhD on the end of the world. That was a few years ago. If I was doing it today, I could almost say I was doing it during the end of the world. Or that's what it's felt like recently. I mean, really. Like everybody else, I've been locked down for the last couple of months. I'm incredibly lucky to live where I live. I walk out most nights to see sights like this. I'm being extra careful to avoid people, which is why all the night walks. Oh, and because, well, night walks. The walking helps, but I'd still go nuts if I didn't have the other thing I'm incredibly lucky to have. This extraordinary collection of worlds at my fingertips. The pressure of feeling cooped up and claustrophobic is lifted when you can dive into any one of these. And it's not just about escape, although sometimes that's really all you want. It's about learning, thinking, empathizing with others, discovering courage to face new and scary circumstances, resourcefulness in the face of strange new challenges, love in time of fear. Fiction is crucial. It allows us access to many worlds, many lives. And the writing of fiction, or poetry, in praise of poetry, allows us to explore these pressures and challenges, anxieties and uncertainties, to inhabit them, to make sense of them. The stories and poems I read for this competition were all responding to the urgency and sense of doom in the air, but also to the hope and the possibilities that are emerging, or feel like they are just around the corner. There was isolation, there was sadness, there was hope, there was love. As ever, it was an absolute privilege to read these entries and have a small glimpse into the lives and the minds of their creators. And the winning entry was the perfect blend of strong and vivid writing, a topical reference taken to the nth degree, and the perfect metaphorical response to the unknown and unseeable fears which permeate our lives right now. But first, congratulations to the Merit Certificate winners. Congratulations to the commended and highly commended entrants. And the winner of the 13-year age category for the 2020 Nan Manefield Young Writers Award goes to Emma Baldwin for A Piece of Home. Congratulations, Emma.
Hi, my name is Emma. The inspiration for my story came from the entertainment that jigsaws and puzzles have provided us with during our time stuck at home. This motivated me to focus my story around the idea of a jigsaw. My favourite stories to write are those that involve a level of fear and suspense. This is why I particularly enjoyed writing this one. It is called A Piece of Home. A piece of home. I scramble to find the last few pieces, determined to finish it before dinner. I can almost hear the sound of the ocean waves lapping against the shore and feel the warmth of the glowing sun as it begins to dip below the horizon, creating a symphony of colour across the sky. It was a beautiful jigsaw, making me wonder why it had been hidden away in the attic for so long. Filled with satisfaction, I lift the last piece and carefully press it into the waiting hole. Without warning, I collapse and am engulfed in a silent darkness. Jolting upright, I open my eyes to see a crimson sun setting into the horizon. I look down at my hands buried in sand. Beads of sweat meander their way down my forehead and leap to the ground. I frantically look around, horrified as I suddenly realize I'm inside the jigsaw. The sunset, the beach, everything is the same. I slowly get to my feet and a fresh wave of fear washes over me as my eyes survey a dense forest blanketing an island. The only sign of life is a rundown lighthouse separated from the shore by a line of rocks with dagger edges. This is most likely my only chance of finding help. Each rock is engulfed in a slimy coat of seaweed and moss. As I precariously lurch from one rock to another, the sun continues to sink below the horizon, stretching the shadows and fading the daylight. I can now barely see my feet below me as I finally reach the lighthouse. Carefully, I push the weather door open on its broken hinge and am swallowed in a foreboding darkness. I fumble along the wall for a light switch, but my fingers find only peeling paint. I reach the base of a winding staircase fitted with rotting floorboards and peer upwards into the ominous darkness. Placing each foot carefully, I begin to climb as the warped wood groans at my presence. My body drags my legs behind it, but I finally reach the top. Trying to catch my breath, I gaze at the vast ocean enshrouded in the shadows of the night. A shard of moonlight spills into the room from a sky now speckled with stars. Without warning, the floorboards groan yet again. But this time I hadn't moved. Frozen in fear, I hear it again. I can feel my heart racing in my chest as I slowly creep over to the top of the stairs. The creaking of the floorboards is becoming louder with each step. Sweat starts trickling down my neck. I peer down the spiral and spot a silhouette of a hunched figure climbing the stairs. As I look closer, my breath quickens. The figure is not human, snarling and crawling on four legs. Sharp, dagger-like claws pierce the wooden floorboards with every step. I frantically look around, hoping to spot any sign of human life, any sign of hope. The creaking of the stairs is rapidly becoming louder. Suddenly, I spot a jigsaw laying on the ground. Although it is unfinished, I can make out the image in an instant. An image of my house. There is only one piece missing from the jigsaw. As adrenaline floods my body, I scan the room, knowing this jigsaw might be my only way home. The figure has almost reached the top of the stairs, their deep growl and heavy breathing now audible. My heart leaps as I spot the final piece of the jigsaw, resting on the ledge of one of the windows. I hurriedly grab it and run back over to the jigsaw, fumbling to fit the piece in the final hole. The figure rounds the final corner, just as the final piece falls into place. My breathing becomes shaky as the figure comes into view. In that moment, I collapse to the ground and am engulfed in darkness. My eyes flutter open. Frantically, I look around and let out a cry of relief at the familiarity of my bedroom. Shaking, I approach my desk and look down at an incomplete jigsaw. I glance one last time at the alluring sunset before my trembling hands scoop the pieces back into its box, silently vowing never to touch it again.
The judge for the 14 to 15 years old category is Will Kostakis. As a high school student, Will won the Sydney Morning Herald Young Writer of the Year for a collection of short stories, and shortly after published his first book, Loathing Lola. He's best known for his young adult novels, The Sidekicks and The First Third, and his latest series, The Monuments, has been shortlisted in the 2020 Indie Book Awards. Thank you, Will.
Hi everyone, I'm young adult author Will Kostakis, and while we all can't come together to toast the winners of this year's Nan Manefield Young Writers Award, the entrants this year and the winners are no less worth celebrating than they have always been. Now, judging this competition is one of my favourite events of the year, and it was an absolute pleasure to dig into these stories while I was trapped at home and should have been writing a book, but don't tell my publisher that. Look, time and again, I am blown away by the quality that's being produced by our young writers in this country, and especially in this competition. You know, we see teenagers fearlessly dealing with such intense topics, such emotional topics, with sensitivity and with this understanding and command of the English language that I am frankly quite envious of. I think there are lots of future authors in this category, but as I say every year when I present the winners, if tonight does not go to plan, then you know what? There's always next year. There are always more chances to get your work out there. This is an incredibly subjective process, and any of the stories and poems that are going to be celebrated today, any of those could have won, because it is an incredibly subjective process. And while it doesn't come down to a coin toss, it is a process of constantly going back and reading and rereading and rethinking and rethinking. And I had 5 different winners before I'd settled on the one. And it was a real painstaking process. And that is a testament to all of you as writers. Now, the merit certificate winners. Now, these aren't in any order. I think I've got them in alphabetical order, but if it's wrong, please don't yell at me on Twitter. The merit certificate winners are Ben Cullen, Maddie Hagley, Lucy Horton, Yolanda Pugh, Celine Wren, Harry Scambler, William Stabber, Miranda Stretch, and Evie Warburton. Congratulations to our merit certificate winners. Next, we're on to the Commended Award, which goes to Annie Ming Ko Wallach for La Rivière de mes pensées. That's my high school French coming in handy for the first time in a decade. Hey! The Highly Commended Award goes to Vicky Guan for Your Letters, which was an absolutely stunning poem that I really, really loved. But there can only be one winner. And the winner of the 14 to 15 years age category for the 2020 Nan Manefield Young Writers Award goes to Elizabeth Sutherland for her story Somewhere Else, which was a beautifully written piece about the transportive power of gaming, which I'm sure a lot of us are discovering in this time of social isolation and staying at home. It was a really remarkable piece, and it looked at the way that video gaming can bring people together, but how school and the pressures of growing up can pull people apart. Congratulations, Elizabeth, and congratulations to all of the entrants this year. I had an absolute blast reading your work. Thanks so much.
The backstory is that I was told to write something for homework, which heavily features setting as a narrative element. And I was sitting in class, and outside it was drizzling lightly, and the sky was all greyish-white, so I thought I was going to describe where I was first, then seeing where it took me next. And this is what I wrote. Do you remember this time 3 weeks ago? The sky was an iron sheet of white, pinned up by the peeling plaster gum trees, leaves gently dangling in the misty rain. Those slabs of brick had been standing for over 100 years. Generations and generations of girls had been flowing in and out of those dusty halls. That day, I saw the Australian sun gently paint my classmates' hair a pretty light brown, and although the birds were sweetly warbling outside, I didn't want to be there. It was my world, but it was old and stupid, like a cheap plastic yo-yo collecting dust under a junk shop shelf. I kept telling you how lost I was, and how I wanted so badly to be that dashing gunslinger roaming a bombed-out Massachusetts, shooting baddies into the pink dusk. You and I dreamt in dry grass, sand, clear blue water and broken bridges, in shiny gold cartridges and broken Chevrolet Bel Airs, in nuclear fusion and domestic robots. We trembled on the black leather couches, frozen in front of our bluish screens as the eucalypti shook outside in the wind. We saw the leaves shake on the displays in front of us, and took it as reality. But outside, where you could really smell the metallic rain as it beat down on the window panes, where you could talk with a friend and not know what they were going to say, where you couldn't unmake decisions, the world was spinning by. We were somewhere else. I was on the command deck of a Leviathan airship rooted in the sky, the quiet hubbub of military productivity buzzing around me. You were deep underground in a titanium-white laboratory, talking to synthetic people. My mum was in the kitchen, chopping watermelon. Food is ready. The call was issued. We tore our eyes from our screens, staring blankly into the distant bookshelf as our vision faded back to normal. Coming. The watermelon tasted too saccharine, unreal almost. I caught a glimpse of the sunset streaming in through the window netting and onto the steel of the kitchen sink, working golden fibres into the metal as if a fairy herself spun those threads. I heard the voices of rainbow lorikeets singing outside, even if just for a second. Then we were in our other world again, hearts pounding. We were completely consumed. In our story world of dreams and war, we crossed hellish mountains, laughing into the guttural roars of green thunder booming overhead. We conquered giant draconian beasts with claws that could shred a man in seconds. We exulted in the cheers and praise of hundreds. We were legendary. Then we toughed out the exam block, and a week later you stopped coming. I heard muffled shouting in the voicemail you sent me. Blows. Your phone hitting the floor in a hasty goodbye. I knew in my heart of hearts that you weren't ever coming back to sit with me on those black leather couches where time never passed, where it was just us and our computers frozen in space. Back in those brick slabs I saw you, trudging through their withered halls, head bowed in the same way as when you bent over piles of homework. I saw the teacher call you time and time again to introduce stricter and stricter mandates. I tried approaching you. I clapped my hand onto your back, like old times. I whispered in your ear of dry grass, crystalline water, crumbling megastructures and broken Bel Airs existing in our own beloved universe stored on a disk drive. When you look back at me, I didn't even know you. I have tutoring on the weekend now. I can't come to your house and waste time playing that stupid game. Outside, the sky was a brilliant blue, yawning through thin clouds and shining sun rays. Students chittered in the hallways. Their footsteps pounded through carpet and concrete. I thought back to 3 weeks ago when we shared that plate of watermelon and ran over each other trying to get back to that stupid game. I thought back to how the last time you really smiled was while playing that stupid game. As the years tarried on, I noticed the tired limp in your gait, the sunken circles under your eyes, and the 6 extracurriculars you dropped. You left school one day and never came back. I was thriving. I was somewhere else.
The judge for the 16 to 18 years age category is Ceridwen Dovey. Ceridwen is a social anthropologist and author of novels and essays. Her debut novel, Bloodkin, was published in 16 countries and shortlisted for 3 awards, including the Dylan Thomas Prize. Her latest book, Inner Worlds, Outer Spaces, is about courageous individuals who are creating lasting change in the world around them. She is a former winner of this very award when she was in high school, and many of her novels and essays are published here in Stanton Library. We're very grateful for you being involved. Thank you, Ceridwen.
Hi everybody, and I hope you're all coping okay through these difficult times. It was such a joy this year to once again be a judge for the 16 to 18 category of the writing competition. I've been doing this for many years with great pleasure, and I am pretty sure this year that we had more entries than we have in a while, which I took as a very heartening sign that in these difficult times of isolation, many of us, if we're lucky, are turning to writing and expressing ourselves in that way to process what we're going through. And to me, that's the real beauty always of any kind of creative writing. So there were lots of really interesting themes as well that came across, and I just wanted to mention a few of the clusters of themes that I found really interesting. One of the recurring themes was that many of the pieces were about the nature of art and self-expression, and how much of oneself to put into one's writing. So a self-aware kind of sense of the consciousness of self, how that's presented on the page, how complicated and complex that can be. There were also very complex meditations on mortality, often channeled through descriptions of changing seasons. There were some wonderful poems and stories that had a strongly sort of feminist bent to them. I loved those ones. Questioning received wisdom about gender, often reprocessing and rethinking ancient fables and epics that have been passed down to us over the ages, stories about women from Greek legend, for example, reimagined for modern times. There were some really pointed critiques of materialism and of the ways in which technology is changing how we live, often in very negative ways. There was, interestingly, quite a lot of what I would call COVID poetry, which was just wonderful to see. I hadn't yet seen this moment processed on the page in language the way that I had in several of these poems. And I just wanted to mention one of them in particular, Ode to Isolation by Katerina Radovanich. She has a great series of lines in the poem. Ceremonial motions repeat through the days, limping normalcy, staggered in time, life through a window frame. And I thought that line, life through a window frame, was just such a wonderful way of describing how we've all been living in these past months, and to see it in a poem just really helped me to understand and to feel that I'm less alone. Again, another beautiful thing about being able to share our words with each other. I will move on to the awards. So I'm just going to be reading them here from my screen. I've awarded 10 merit certificates this year because it was such a wonderful batch of entries. So Katerina Radovanich, the Ode to Isolation poem that I just mentioned, Elodie Rumanoff, Ice Girl, Abigail Everett, 2321, Corey Palmer for I Remember You, Matthew Platikos for Winter's Philosophy, Chewong Park for A Split Second, Akriti Nandwani, The Monster Inside Me, Jason Lim, My Art, Hayden Chan, Untitled, and Zoe Coles, Untitled. Then my commended selections for this year are shared between two entrants. Tai Fan for her story Mirages, which is a wonderful description of a friendship between two women, but also trying to understand different forms of expression in image and then in text. And then an exquisite poem by Sarah Curran, called Beach Farer. And I just have to read you one of her lines because I found this poem incredibly atmospheric and transporting. And our moon, a false god, shouldering wisps of blue cloud. A very, on the surface, simple poem about a trip to the beach, but through her language turns it into something quite absolutely epic, and a poem I'll remember for a long time. Highly commended. I've chosen Du Quang Mai for his poem Lord of the Flies, which again, just absolutely brilliant poem. Again, on the surface of things, a fairly simple concept. The speaker of the poem is coming home from seeing the play, it seems, of Lord of the Flies somewhere in the city, and is describing Central Station and this wash of feelings, but it is got a kind of postmodern bent in the way that he has used these very short little sentences and phrases, but layering them in order to create this real mood and feeling, and ending with a feeling of just heartbreak and longing. I found it a very mysterious and beautiful poem. And the winner this year is Bessie Yuan for her short story, My Father. This short story just grabbed me from the very first line. It's absolutely gorgeous language. It's really just the detail of a lived world. The very first scene describing this time that the speaker spends in her father's furniture store as a girl, and then gradually over time processing the changing relationship with her father. And I just absolutely loved it. And from the moment I saw it, I knew this was the one. So I want to congratulate all of the winners this year, and I would hope that everybody can find time and make time to keep reading and writing to help themselves and their families and their loved ones to stay safe and to stay sane, and to remember what it is that brings us together as humans.
Hi everyone, my name's Bessie, and today I have the privilege of talking to you about my writing journey and read aloud my winning entry titled My Father. At school, we were once given a reading from which I remember a line that went something like, "Writers seek out the extraordinary, the unusual, the unique, the bits and pieces of life that might otherwise be overlooked." And that's what I aim to do with my writing. You see, as a child, I read a lot simply because I loved being transported into a world away from where I was. Back then, honestly, writing to me was a chore. I hated it. And then one day, I challenged myself to enjoy writing. Let's just write one story, I told myself. That one story turned into 2 stories, and now I have a whole folder titled Random Writing, I guess. Somewhere along the line of writing my first story, I found a passion for it. When I write short stories, I begin with something ordinary, some random quote, something normal I'd seen that left a lasting impression on me. I take it and I write a story which will hopefully make the ordinary extraordinary. With that, I found the ability to create my own worlds. This year, I had the privilege of winning the Nan Manefield Young Writers Award. I would like to thank the judges, the Mayor of Sydney, Stanton Library and North Sydney Council who made this competition possible. Now I'd like to read my piece titled My Father. I grew up in the furniture store. The faithful little store stood in the midst of Main Street, a cobalt blue sign next to a moon reminiscent of the DreamWorks animation logo, proclaiming its goods. Behind the gated windows, people would peek in to see the wide array of furniture. It was a small store, with a single aisle that you could pick your way through, admiring the rounded or carved chair legs. Feel the springiness of the mattresses. My father, the furniture deliverer. I'd wait for him in the store, watching him leave from the back steps, the truck pulling away with the promise of return. I loved it there, my own personal haven. There were mattresses separated by tall boys, single wardrobes and dresses. Chairs were stacked up the walls, dusty, worn cardboard price tags hanging from their legs. The first hours I would annoy the shopkeeper, a frazzled, greying lady. I still remember the smell, her perfume, musty, mixed with the smell of mothballs from her burgundy cardigan. The familiar smell of plastic that swallowed almost every piece of assorted furniture that came through. The light fragrance of the synthetic wood in mahogany, walnut, pine, a gradient of colours. The swatches that hung from a broken keychain. I'd help piece the furniture together, her foreman drilling holes, me wiping the sawdust away with a tiny index. In the afternoons, as I waited for my father, I lay upon one of the 5 king-sized beds for show and looked up. There'd be tiny dust particles perfectly alight from the single windows that lined the yellowing walls, moving slowly, floating ethereally towards another moment in time. I'd count down the seconds. They became my existence as I lay spread-eagled on the plastic-covered mattress, waiting. Weightless, and then my father was coming through the back door. My father, who always came back. He smelled like smoke, always like the cigarettes he never stopped smoking. I have come to remember him as a series of distorted features. The smell of tobacco as he pulled out a single cigarette, the swish of his lighter, the callous thumb swiftly starting a flame that never burned, the almost imperceptible sigh of relief as he held it to his mouth, breathing in deeply, breathing out a suffocating cloud of grey smoke, and then he would go outside and enjoy the moment of solitude on the front porch, entering with the smell still clinging to him like the sadness I always saw in his eyes. My father, the smoker. The next day we would be at the furniture store again, and the hours would again tick down into minutes and finally single unalterable seconds. The sun would rise and set. We would be silhouetted against the darkening sky, his cigarette a dot of light against the reds, pinks and purples of summer as we strolled home side by side. It was on one of these nights where I was sent to bed earlier. Feeling rebellious, I pushed back the covers and tiptoed out of bed. It was a near weekly routine. I wanted to get to the kitchen, where I knew the window would be open. The night air would be so perfectly stagnant, so thick it was a weight. But the moon would be perfectly positioned, a shaft of light would fall directly onto the third tower from the right, and I would lie right there and wait for the stars to disappear, the light to be engulfed by clouds, the breaking of dawn. The world would come alive and there would be an explosion of vivid colour, and I would be there, watching. Instead, I heard my mother's angry voice, my father nursing a bottle of amber liquid, silently. My mother standing, accusations flying out, a torrent of disappointment, and me listening, watching and always waiting. My father, the gambler. My father, the cheater. My father, the liar. I grew up in the furniture store. It closed years ago as dwindling customers shut down smaller businesses on Main Street. It's yet to be leased. The barred windows are choked with dust, dust covering the floors, devoid of the rich wood colours. The windows no longer transparent. When I walk past, I am reminded of the cigarettes he used to smoke, the hours I waited, the billowing grey cloud as he drove away in the truck I watched as a child. My father who left.
Thank you, Bessie, and thank you to all of the young authors and to our judges. If you would like to read the stories of the winners, highly commended and commended awards, for the first time this year, we have published them in an ebook. You'll be able to borrow this from BorrowBox and Indie Reads ebook apps with your Stanton Library card number. More information is available on our website. A big thank you to our sponsors this year. It's World Book, Ensemble Theatre, Sydney Living Museums, Taronga Zoo, Sydney Zoo, Books Kinokuniya, the Constant Reader Bookshop and North Sydney Council. Thank you for watching the 2020 Nan Manefield Young Writers Award. We look forward to seeing you next year, hopefully with a live event.